Hey everyone, just wanted to jump into a topic that I think can improve pretty much everyone's overall quality of life, and that is how to become an athlete. Now, when we're talking about being an athlete before going into, any concepts or anything like that, we want to define, what it means to be an athlete or what is an athlete. Is it someone who plays sports? Is it someone who's young? Someone who runs fast, jumps high? What does that mean? What does it mean to be athletic? Now, in my mind, everybody is an athlete, regardless of whether or not you played sports. So taking away the obvious examples of calling a basketball player an athlete or a football player an athlete, let's take a parent with young kids who has never played sports before in their lives. That parent is an athlete. As your kids begin to move around, you need to move around with them. There's going to be lots of situations where you have to essentially act as an athlete, as a parent, to keep your child safe. Let's say your child is playing on a toy slide, in the backyard, and they misstep going up the ladder and they start to fall backwards on that ladder. You have to act quickly as a parent to catch your child before they get hurt. So even though that's not trying to dunk a basketball or trying to tackle someone on the football field, that is being an athlete. That is an athletic movement, that ability to actually catch your child. Let's fast forward a little bit to someone who is a little bit more elderly and they're walking out in the community or they're walking in their home and they trip over a step or a curb or a rug in their house. The ability to take that quick step and catch yourself before falling over, that is being an athlete. That is an athletic movement. So regardless of whether or not you consider yourself an athlete, we are athletes in one way or another. And it would be beneficial to train that way because it's not only going to help us in situations like that where safety is involved, but it's just going to increase your overall quality of life. So I want to make a few videos to kind of talk about how to train that way, how to train as an athlete, how to become an athlete. And without simplifying it too much, there's essentially 4 major topics that can really, make you, a better athlete. Getting in shape, building muscle, making your muscle strong, making your muscle explosive. And today in this first video, I wanted to jump into that first step, getting in shape. Now, when we talk about getting in shape, it's kind of similar to the athlete question. What does it mean to be in shape? Now, that is going to be a little bit different, depending on where you come from in terms of your background and your history. If you're someone who has recently played a sport, got out of it for a little bit, and you're getting back into it, chances are you're going to be in pretty decent shape in terms of training as an athlete. If you are someone who has never played a sport, or you haven't played a sport in years and years and years, and you're trying to get back into something like that, you're obviously going to be a little bit further behind than that athlete who just took a little bit of time off. But when we're talking about getting in shape, there's essentially 3 major areas that are going to help you get in shape to train as an athlete and help you build that base. Now, that first aspect of getting in shape is building your metabolic base. Now, when we talk about building your metabolic base, you can essentially view this almost as like your stereotypical cardio training, that low intensity, low impact zone 2 cardio, getting on an elliptical, getting on an exercise bike, swimming laps in the pool, getting on a rower, something like that, and just trying to go for a prolonged amount of time at a low to medium intensity. That is going to be a really good way to build that metabolic base. Now, why do we want to build that metabolic base? There's 2 major reasons why building your metabolic base is very beneficial. Number 1, it increases your capacity. So if you are someone who can't even jog 100 feet without getting out of breath, how are you going to sprint 100 feet without getting out of breath or potentially injuring yourself? So we have to start somewhere, and starting with this lower intensity cardio is a really good way to, over time, increase your capacity to do those higher level activities as you gradually introduce your body to them. So starting, 2 times a week, building up to 3 or 4 times a week, on a piece of cardio equipment, and just trying to maintain, a nice steady pace for starting maybe 10 to 15, building it up to 20, 30, 40 minutes, building in building that base and increasing your capacity over time to do higher level activities. Second reason why it's so important to build your metabolic base is it helps and increases your recovery. Now, when we're talking about someone who hasn't trained before, or they're an athlete who's taken years off, or someone who's never been an athlete, you might do a intense workout on a Monday. Come Thursday or Friday, your body still might be feeling it. You still might be physically sore. You still might be mentally tired because you did not build that metabolic base. If we build that base, then we can get to the point where we can have, a pretty intense workout on a Monday. And while only taking maybe like a day off in between, come Wednesday, your body is already ready to go for another high intensity workout. So building that metabolic base increases your body's ability to recover faster so you can train, for longer over time as you become an athlete. Moving down to number 2, improving your tendon tolerance. Now this, I think, is a area that is, severely overlooked and leads to a lot of injuries. If we think about, someone who hasn't played sports in years and they try to go back to playing that sport, or someone who, again, has never played sports and they try to maybe pick up a sport later on in life, or they try to go into, a high intensity, boot camp type of class at their local gym. Those activities, that sport, that exercise class, that is probably going to involve, some higher intensity, high impact activities. And if you have not exposed your body to something like that for a long amount of time, and you try to jump right into something like that, chances are you're going to get hurt very quickly. Now, it might not be a severe injury like a break or a torn tendon or torn muscle or anything like that, but very high likelihood that you can eventually start to suffer from some type of tendonitis, which over time can become very problematic and lead to other problems down the road. So before we get to a situation like that, if we improve our tendon tolerance, we can reduce the chance that we get hurt in a situation like that. Now, how do we improve our tendon tolerance? One of the ways that I love to improve tendon tolerance is with isometrics. Now, if you're not familiar with isometrics, essentially it is muscular activation without movement. So think about holding a dumbbell about midway up through a bicep curl. So that dumbbell's 90 degrees off the body, the elbow is tucked in. So obviously that bicep is firing, because if it wasn't firing, that dumbbell would just drop down towards the ground. But there's no movement. That dumbbell is just staying in space. So that is an isometric muscle contraction. And obviously there's tons of different movements that follow this same concept. Holding the bottom part of a push-up, holding the top part of a pull-up, holding the bottom position of a lunge or a squat. That is all isometric muscular contraction. Now, why is isometric contraction so important? Why is it so beneficial for becoming an athlete and building that base to train as an athlete? When we have that muscular contraction, we are getting forces going through the tendon in a more controlled way versus trying to lift a heavy weight. So again, think about if you're trying to perform a super heavy back squat and you haven't done a heavy back squat in a while, chances are your knees, the tendons and ligaments are going to be very sore after that, as opposed to gradually improving their tolerance over time by starting with just let's say a body weight isometric squat hold. Isometrics are a really good way to improve that tendon tolerance because we are getting controlled forces through that tendon. So we're putting the tendon in a more controlled environment where there's not as high of a likelihood that we're going to do a quick movement and get hurt, or try to move a heavy object and get hurt. So that's the first reason why isometrics are so important. They allow for controlled loading of the tendon to improve that tolerance. Second reason that isometrics are so important and very beneficial for training as an athlete, they essentially teach your muscles how to fire more efficiently. You essentially rebuild that mind-muscle connection in an isometric contraction because we are getting a prolonged amount of time where that muscle is under tension. When we're doing these isometric contractions and these isometric holds, building up 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15, 20, 30, eventually getting to certain movements where you can hold them for a minute or two. We're getting 60 to 120 seconds potentially of muscle contraction, 60 to 120 seconds of the mind and the muscle connecting and working in sync. So building that mind muscle connection, teaching the muscles how to fire more efficiently and how to fire properly. That's the second reason that isometrics are super beneficial. And then the third reason that isometrics are so beneficial is kind of similar to the first, where we have controlled loading of the tendon. The fact that it's a contraction of the muscle without joint movement means that if we have a problematic area, such as a shoulder or a hip or a knee, we can work the muscles and the tendons without irritating the joint because the joint is not moving. You can find a comfortable position where you could just hold without that, that hip pain or that knee pain, and work athletic qualities without worrying that you're, irritating a problem area. So three major reasons why isometrics are really beneficial and why I love them so much when laying that base for training as an athlete. And then the third one is starting to get athletic, getting athletic. Now, this is going to mean different things for different people. Kind of going back to some of the scenarios that we've used before. A basketball player who's maybe taken a couple weeks, couple months off, already probably has a pretty good, athletic base, or they've already gotten athletic, versus someone who's never played a sport, or has taken years and years off. They might not be as athletic as that person who's taken, less time off. So this is going to be, different areas for different people. So, if you're watching this video and you're going to take these concepts into training, you have to be honest with yourself, where you currently stand at this point in time. But we're talking about getting athletic. What does that mean? It's starting to teach the body how to move, as an athlete. And the best way to do this is with low intensity and high volume plyometric training. Now, the best way to kind of visualize, what that is, think about jumping rope, not at a super intense speed, but just kind of a casual, jump rope workout with your 2-footed hops, your single-legged hops, your side-to-side hops, your crisscross hops, things along those lines. We're obviously not going super high intensity because we're not jumping as high as we can on every single jump. It's a very low intensity movement, but we're doing a high number of repetitions or a high volume. And that we can build over time, similar to our building the metabolic base in terms of, zone 2 cardio. Same thing with our, low intensity plyometric movements. We can build our capacity and build the volume of that over time. Now, if you're someone who hasn't hopped before ever in your life and you're not comfortable with doing that, we can still take that same concept of low intensity plyometric work and high volume and work it in a different way that does not involve actually leaving the ground. And one way that I really like to do that with someone who wants to maybe get into this, but again, just not comfortable hopping, or their body's just not quite ready yet, is with bounces and oscillations, essentially the same thing. Now, think about, you're hopping up and down, just back to the jump rope, 2-foot hops up and down. We can simulate that same movement without actually leaving the ground. So if you were to just kind of bounce in place with your feet staying on the floor the whole time, but just think about, moving rhythmically or moving like an athlete, not moving like a robot like a lot of people do if they're doing like a goblet squat or a back squat, where they're controlling the whole way down and they're controlling the whole way up. That's beneficial for training, but when it comes to actually moving like an athlete, we have to teach the body how to start to move quick and how to start accepting, kind of higher loads through the joints and through the tendons and through the muscles. And bounces and oscillations are a really good way to do that if you are not capable of hopping or you're just not comfortable hopping and actually leaving the ground at this point in time. So again, this is going to be really, individual to where you are at this point in time. But if you're someone who can handle hopping and you haven't done anything athletic in quite a while, starting with hops is great. If you're someone who just not comfortable with it, just work on just rhythmically moving the body. Start to teach the body how to move that way before getting into higher intensity activities. And what that does is similar to, we talked about isometrics and improving the efficiency of the muscle to fire. As we start doing these, more athletic movements, or those low intensity plyos, we're building, more athletic traits such as, increasing our muscle fiber recruitment, increasing our rate coding, which is just going to be beneficial to us in the long term as we start to get into those higher intensity activities. As we build those qualities up now, we're going to get to the point where we can, run faster and jump higher down the line. So when talking about getting in shape, building the base for being an athlete, those three areas are what we really want to focus on. Building your metabolic base, improving your tendon tolerance, and starting to get athletic and teaching the body how to move. So in the next video, we're going to move into the next concept, talking about building muscle and how that translates to training like an athlete and becoming a better athlete.